Welcome everyone to episode 6 of Dragons Collective. If you've not seen the show before, a bunch of creators get together to talk about RPG topics and such, and the main theme for this week was what's missing from D&D, though you could extend that to what's missing from Pathfinder, to be honest. Now, without further ado, let's jump in and see what some creators are saying.
Hello Collective, it's your friendly neighborhood Drunken Kobold here, today contributing to the theme of what is missing from Dungeons and Dragons. I actually had to think long and hard about this one because the answer I was going to give was spoiled as the upcoming book Fizban's Treasury of Dragons. Dragons have been oddly absent from 5e, and the dragons that we do have are underpowered for what they should be. So I'm hoping that Fizban's Treasury of Dragons does correct this imbalance, but that left me with nothing to say for this video. So I've been thinking long and hard, and I came to the conclusion that Dungeons and Dragons 5e needs a magic compendium similar to what was released in 3.5. The only thing about this magic compendium is it's not just going to be spells, but also a variety of magic items. Why is this something that I feel 5e Dungeons & Dragons needs, and what is the benefit of this? Well, we have had now 3 books that provide spells and magic items and magic effects like magic tattoos and Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, and they are spread out over a variety of books. This was done with the intent that Player's Handbook +1 was going to be a thing in Adventures League, but that is simply not the case anymore. They have ditched Player's Handbook +1 as a rule for Adventures League, and I think it's time now to be able to bring every spell, the magic items that are in the DMG and the campaigns, and magic-like things like tattoos into one book that players can access and freely reference without having to flip through a ton of books to find what they need. With the magic compendium, we would be able to also update spellbook cards to be able to have a variety of content among those. Spellbook cards don't frequently get updated with erratas, so for instance, Booming Blade and whatnot that was errated in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, they still need erratas in the spellbook cards. The stuff that was released in Tasha's, we need spellbook cards for. We need cards for the tattoos. And releasing a box called the Magic Compendium would be able to add what is missing from 2014 to present, while also delivering cards with erratas of what is missing. So that is my 2 cents about what Dungeons and Dragons 5e needs, is a magic compendium, and that is my story, and I am sticking to it. I hope everyone has a good one, and we will see you later.
How's it going? No Fun Allowed here, and what is D&D missing? Here's what it's missing. It's missing a beginner mode, a vanilla normal mode, and then the expert hardcore mode. So here's the thing about 5e D&D, or actually technically any D&D. I would never, ever, ever run a base game of D&D for a kid or someone that's brand spanking new to tabletop role-playing games. Way too complex. So many numbers, so much things going on, so many different options, way, way, way too complex. You tell someone, hey, oh, by the way, if you have a 16, that's a +3. Oh, and if you're level 4, then that means you only have 2nd level spells. And, you know, those numbers just are ridiculous to anybody that's brand new. So what D&D needs is, it needs that beginner mode that is super duper simple. It's just a very, very simple thing you can read off right there. Very simple actions, very simple character building. Heck, maybe there isn't even character building in this basic, easy thing. Maybe it is just flat out, oh, here's these 4 different pre-gens here. Very, very simple. We need to make it so that anyone can pick this up and it's accessible. Then, of course, we have the basic stuff. We have the things that we know. That is the middle ground. That's the vanilla. That's the basic. That is the normal. We have all of that just fine, fleshed out and dandy. But then we get into the expert mode. That is when we get into the very, very advanced options. That's when we get into, okay, here's different rest variants. Here is different class options, different character building options, different campaign building options, all these various things. That right there is what D&D is missing, because eventually you play D&D long enough, you're going to recognize the tricks of the trade, right? You're going to recognize everything. Eventually some people are going to want to move on to something that's a little bit more crunchier maybe, or maybe they're going to want just a little bit of variance, and having those rules baked into the book itself by Wizards of the Coast is going to make this game a lot more enjoyable for the beginners, a lot more enjoyable for the people that are the air quote average players, and of course it's going to pander to the people that want a little bit more.
I think it's fair to say that pretty much anything that you want in your Dungeons and Dragons game can be a thing. So is there anything really missing from Dungeons and Dragons when your imagination's the limit? Well, when it comes to sets like these, yes, I think there is. Now, a big set like this Curse of Strahd one has extra bits that these normal sort of adventure or source books, whatever you want to call them, have. Now, these have maps at the back, and these are glorious. That's all the handouts that these give, though. And I do sometimes wish, certainly when they talk about specific notes or invitations or whatever, I wish these had it. Now, the Curse of Strahd set, for instance, has these sort of letters that you can sort of obviously hand out and show to players. And I think stuff like this just makes giving that bit of information to someone else that bit more special. Now, of course, you can make these at home. You could type them up, print them off. I'm sure there's plenty of things like this available online. So is it really missing? From D&D, no, but from the D&D books, I do think that these are a missing element. The second part that D&D is missing is detail. I know it sounds really weird. You know, you've got this huge, lovely book full of details. But then a prime example of this is Easthaven. Now, it's got a population here of 750 people, and yet it's got 13 pages. Think of all of the stores and, you know, the people that would come and go above that 750. That, you know, you've potentially got 1,000 people in this town by combining the people that live there and the people that come and go, deliver goods and just generally pass through. You've got 1,000 people there, and it's 13 pages. And to be honest, you've got a lot of artwork, glorious artwork, and then you've also got maps, and then a good sort of 4 or 5 pages of that are the caves and the caverns. And I just feel like I would love some more detail on them from, it's almost like a DLC. You know, you get this and then you get the add-ons, so you get all the extra information about the 10 towns if you ever wanted to really just do a campaign. Because I'd love to do a small campaign just in one of those 10 towns. I think that would be quite cool. I'm sure that is out there in the world. I just don't know of it. And moving on, let's jump into the polls. So these have been done on Discord and Twitter, and I've sort of combined the results this time. The link for the Discord and my Twitter will be in the description box below, and probably the pinned comment and stuff like that. Feel free to join and get involved. There's 2 polls this week, and the first one is, in your next D&D or Pathfinder adventure, would you rather face 1 dragon-sized rat, 5 rat-sized dragons, or all of them at once? And, well, you know what, it was actually pretty even across the board, but just swooping it, the best answer, because that's the one I voted for, was all of them at once, and that literally won it by 1 vote. The second poll was, what brand of 3D terrain tiles do you use for your D&D or Pathfinder adventures? The options were A. Dwarven Forge, B. Warlock tiles, C. Other, anything else that is, or D. You don't use 3D tiles. Well, I can confirm with 72% of the vote, most people don't use any tiles at all, any 3D tiles. And that just shows you don't need 3D tiles to enjoy D&D or Pathfinder. Anyway, that's enough of the polls, on to the next.
Hey everybody, Rivers from Rivers RPG channel, and this is for the Dragons Collective, and this topic is what's D&D missing, and my opinion on that is it's missing some critical hit charts. We used to have them back in AD&D, and even in 3.5 I found some cards from Pathfinder that had critical hits and critical misses. So that's one thing I really miss from the older versions or the older editions. I also think it's still missing some skills and some feats. In 3.5 there's a lot of feats, and maybe too many feats, but I don't think there's enough right now, and I don't like how they do the feats versus the ability score. So that's another topic though. And skills, I really liked how first edition did the thieving skills or rogue skills. They were called thieves back then, and they were the only ones who could pick locks, check for traps, stuff like that, and it was a percentile. And it was a little different in 3.5. They had skills, and you could cross class skills then, and it would cost you more points to get them. It would cost you twice as much, but you could still get the skills. And some books I think that were really neat coming out of 3.5 were like the Complete Scoundrel and the Complete Adventurer. They really had some good books there. And the books on the race, like the Races of Stone, I can't remember the other ones, but they had good books on all the different races. And I know 5th edition is bringing more and more stuff in. It's going to grow. So these issues may be covered in the future, but those are just my opinion on what D&D is missing. So those are my thoughts. And like I said, the critical hits charts are really fun sometimes. You can, like the cards, we use those in 3.5, and I rolled a d20. I rolled a 20 in natural. I was DMing, so I rolled it again to confirm it. It was another 20. So I pulled out a card, and to go with 2 natural 20s was a decapitation. Our ninja wasn't real happy about it, but it played out well for rolling 2 natural 20s, I thought anyway. But those are things that I think that 5e will consider, and maybe you'll see them in the future. So I'm Rivers from Rivers RPG. Have a good game.
Now let's talk about the news for this week. Now forget about red dragons, black dragons, blue, green, white dragons, forget all of those. WizKids has confirmed in December they are going to be releasing the pinnacle of all dragons, the Gold Dragon. Now if there's anything from Austin Powers that I learnt, is that I love gold, and I am very, very excited for the Gold Dragon's release. There are going to be 2 premium boxes of Saltmarsh figures or miniatures, and it feels, I'm getting the vibe from this, that they're very much going to be sort of akin to the ones they did for Curse of Strahd, where they are set boxes with sort of like a clear plastic panel, and you know what you're getting. I really appreciated that, sort of bringing a lot to life, and you knew what you were getting from the Curse of Strahd ones. So more for Saltmarsh, I think that's only going to be a good thing, as Saltmarsh has some very cool and interesting monsters. Not quite a miniature, measuring in at 8 inches tall, is Ublex, I think I've pronounced that roughly right, as part of the D&D Icons of the Realms range, and this thing is the Demon Lord of Slime and Ooze. It looks absolutely epic as a miniature. And I think, you know, so certainly plopping that down on the table will get some players excited. Don't have a release date for that one, but the price tag, very similar to sort of the dragons, which are like $60, $70, $80. This one is going to be $69.99 US. And moving away from miniatures, but WizKids still, they are going to be putting out a board game, a sort of small board game called Dungeon Scrawlers Heroes of Undermountain. Players will be trying to collect treasures across 10 different mazes that have various difficulty levels, and there's going to be 20 double-sided dungeon sheets. Playing with 2 to 4 players, apart from the double-sided dungeon sheets, there's also the likes of dry erase markers, tokens, and character tiles and things like that. So coming for 2 to 4 players at $24.99, well, it looks like a fun little D&D themed game from WizKids. Well, that's enough news. Let's crack on with the rest of the show.
Hi folks, I'm Andy from Potable Gaming, and this week we are talking about things that are missing from D&D. Now, I don't really feel qualified to talk about that. I've not really interrogated all the source books that we can, and I also find that with the beauty of D&D is that if it doesn't exist now, you can homebrew it, so go for that. But one thing I do know that I'm using a lot in a recent campaign is something that might be missing from your games of D&D, subversion of the trope there, is playing about with the rule of cool and certain abilities. And we all know the rule of cool, and I'm a big proponent of that rule. And one thing my character currently is doing is using prestidigitation a lot to alter things, not to alter the outcome or alter the rules, but just make things look more interesting in universe. So he's a close-up magician bard class, and it's a lot of fun playing that. And one thing he regularly does is goes to swing out with what looks to be a magic wand in his hand. And at the last second, that turns into his sword. Now, I'm not asking for advantage on combat for this, it's purely just thematic. The enemy wouldn't really care about it because they just think they're getting attacked anyway, so they're preparing for a blow. But my character's a bit flamboyant, he's a bit excessive. The idea of him having this sort of hidden weapon, because using the sword might be a touch uncouth, is really fun. And it just adds that little bit of extra depth. I regularly call out my DM, like, I'm going to use prestidigitation to do this or to do that. Not for any combat advantage, just because I think it would be fun in the moment. It tells that story in our fight. This came to wonderful effect when we were taking part in a sort of side quest in which we ended up in a circus where we took part in a combat challenge against a monster. The monster was a beholder. And it turned out this beholder was the ringmaster of the circus. And the whole point of this fight was because he was so monumentally tough, it was a work. It was a fake fight, and he was just going to kind of battle with these adventurers for as long as he could, and if they caught on, it would turn into a big fight. And my character, being a seasoned performer, clocked that this was a work and started to tell the team and play up to it. And I started saying, well, I'm going to use prestidigitation to do this, to do that, to start adding different things to it. And my DM was fine, because by the end of this, all of our party had anime-style power-up glow effects and glowing weapons, and our voices were amplified, and everything looked more intense, because we realised now this was a show for the crowd, and we were using it to put a show for the crowd. And my team was like, yeah, you're not even rolling for that. That's just happening because that's what this fight is meant to be. And it was fantastic. It was glorious. It was such a fun experience. It was a great twist in the tail. I want to thank my DM for that one. And it's a great thing to do. And it's the kind of thing you might not be able to do if you're following the rules too much by going, oh, well, that's going to cost you any for actions. No, if it's not going to change the combat per se, it's just going to enhance the storytelling. Fudge the rules a little bit. Have fun. Your characters are meant to be masters of some of these abilities. Let them be and have fun with it. But let me know what you think down in the comments below. Am I way off base? Is this something you might try, or is it something you do? Let us know down in the comments. And as always, I've been Andy, and it's your round.
Doopy doopy doo, doopy doopy doo. I wonder what this is. Looks like a baby gelatinous cube. Roll dexterity check. What? Hey everyone, it's Clara. So today I'm going to do a scratch build on a monster for D&D, and that is one of the most iconic and fun monsters in D&D, and that is the gelatinous cube. This was super quick, super easy, can hold a few minis on the inside. So let's go to the table and show you how I did it. Okay, so this is a simple, I think if you've ever made a cube from paper, it's the same design. Now, for some reason I did this in 2 parts, but you really don't need to. So I started by cutting out the pattern. It was just a basically an L-shaped pattern. I wanted the scale to be so that it was 2 inches each direction, so that it would fit as a 10-foot monster on my dungeon tiles. Once I'd done that, I scored along the areas that are going to fold on both sides so that it just fold real easy. And then what I did was I used masking tape to hold 2 sides together to form a corner, and I put an absolute pile of glue on the inside and the outside of that corner and waited until it would cool down so that it was held firm. And then I repeated that with the other sides. So once I'd done that with the 4 sides that I had, I then cut out a 2-sided piece to add in. Again, don't know why I didn't do this with the rest. And in one of those pieces, I cut out a hole so that I could put it over the top of my mini, and then I used that to glue in. I glued that in place to form my cube. And yes, it was a little bit harder to get it to stick on the inside. I will say that I added dribbles of the glue. I used loads of this glue, but it was cheap. Loads of this glue on the inside, and then I drizzled it all over the outside to give this gelatinous look. Because the glue isn't massively opaque, it's fairly opaque, but you could do little drawings of swords and shields and skeletons. I actually used some old Warhammer pieces that I had. I painted them up. It was a real quick paint job, and then I had them sort of poking through, so I cut holes in the side of the gelatinous cube, and then I glued them in and put loads of glue over the outside to look like the bodies were really sunken, and on the inside these decomposed bodies were on the inside of the gelatinous cube. I then made some glazes, so I used some really bright blues and greens, and I just made some glazes using a glazing medium and watered down the inks, and I drizzled some of this on the outside, and there you have it. Super quick, super cheap, and what an awesome mini. Yes, you can buy really cool ones, but for the amount of time and effort it took, I thought this was really cool, and I'm dead pleased with it. Until next time, take care and bye bye.
And with that fantastic gelatinous cube, brilliant job, Clara, that about wraps today's show up. It's a bit of a short one, but that only gives you the opportunity to go and check out all of the creators involved's channels. Their information is going to be in the description box below under the timestamps, so go check those out. Of course, we will be continuing the discussion over on the Don't Be Bored Discord channel, and the link will be in the description box below as well if you want to jump in and chat to all of us. And there's the polls and stuff like that to get involved in. Other things coming from Don't Be Bored in the next sort of week or so. Well, you've got the tower, unboxing that. That was phenomenal. Check that out when that comes up, so stay subscribed if you want to see that. And also, just being posted, there was the war machines, the catapult and the battering ram. So please check that out, like, subscribe, all that jazz. And until next time, I'm Oliver East, signing out.